everyone, welcome to the WIP Workshop today. Today we're going to be taking a look at 3 work in progress MOCs, and you know, it's one thing to watch the Bionicle Inspiration series and get all that inspiration, but sometimes when you're building you can get a little bit stuck and you go, where do I go now? Or you're working on one character, one specific MOC, and you reach a bit of an impasse. You don't know where to go further from where you're at. And so that's where the WIP Workshop comes in. You can submit some of your work in progress characters, MOCs, and creations, and we'll have a chat about them on the show. I'll give you a little bit of insight into ways that I think you could advance it further and try to help you tackle some of the problems that you're facing. So let's get started, shall we? The first MOC, or the first WIP that we're going to talk about today, the first work in progress, is by rayo Chronos. Now, I actually really like this character. I think what you've done so far is awesome. In your email, you specifically said you felt it was a little boring. I'll read what you actually said. I'm not quite sure what to do with him. He's really boring. I personally disagree. I actually think he's really packed full of emotion. Kind of the way he's sitting now, the fact that he doesn't have hands or feet and that he just kind of has these slight little claw things. To me, I feel like there's this slight like vulnerability and innocence to this character. The big kind of green eye that he's got as well. I feel like that's almost little like puppy dog eyes to some degree. I feel like he's sitting there looking very innocent and curious and kind of is just like, can you help me? Like, I don't have hands or feet. There's a slight sort of tragedy to this MOC. I actually really like that. And I say tragedy not as an insult, you know, not saying like, yeah, it's tragic, you've done a terrible job. Gosh, no, I do not mean that at all. I think that, let me show you an example of a MOC that I think you're kind of channeling to some degree. This is a MOC by Red. It's called Mr. Robotson. When you look at this MOC here, those big piercing blue eyes, his slightly larger hands that has this very, very delicate look to them, and the fact that he's playing this little paper airplane. If you look very closely at the bottom of the image there, you can see it. It kind of blends in a little with the background. There's such an innocence and a childlike quality to this MOC. There's so much emotion packed into it. I go into massive amounts of detail in this MOC with one of the podcasts I did with Mitch Henry, so if you want to dive even further with some of the discussion on this, that's definitely a place to check out. But yeah, there's so much emotion packed behind this MOC. And that's such a hard thing to do, to pack emotion and a relatable, vulnerable character into pieces, into Lego, and to make it a Disney-level quality character that you empathize with and you feel for. And this is certainly a MOC that I think that. So we take it back to your one, and I say, hey, I actually feel little bits of that too, I think, honestly. I like that he has no hands and legs, and that it looks like he's sitting on the floor because he's like, well, I can't get up, man. I don't even have feet. If I stand up, I just fall back over. I kind of like that. And maybe that's not quite what you're channeling. And like you were saying, it's boring. You want to take it to another level. So I'll do my best to help you out with that. But I actually really like what you're doing so far. And so maybe there's ways you could take that even further. I don't specifically know how to articulate that, but playing more into that, into the tragedy of, hey, my hands don't work anymore. My feet don't work. Whoever has built me, whoever has designed me hasn't given me hands or legs. So I can't support my own weight. I can't stand up. There might be ways of playing into that more. And I love that there is this piercing green eye that's such a beautiful contrast from the gunmetals and the greys on this MOC. It's just a beautiful contrast there, and there's so much emotion behind that eye there. It's a very difficult thing, like I said. It's hard to pack in emotion into pieces. So yeah, I'm trying to think of ways that I can articulate how you could take that further. But honestly, just keep playing with it. Just depending on the ways that you kind of pose it and photograph it, maybe you could explore that further. Maybe he even does have hands, but they're not attached to his body. Maybe they've kind of fallen off or something. You could kind of play around with certain elements of that. And maybe you're hearing what I'm saying. You're like, that's cool, but that kind of wasn't the look I was going for. I was looking for more of a sort of, a stealth bot or like some sort of drone or something. And if that is the case, that's still awesome. I can see certain ways that you could expand that further. Maybe you could add some sort of jetpack on the back of the character, giving him like booster engines, and kind of looks like he's got a bit of an aerial on his back there, which, the more that I look at the picture, I don't actually think that's attached to the MOC, but it kind of looks like he has an aerial on his back there, like he's got a little backpack of some kind, like a little reconnaissance backpack, like a soldier or something. Maybe you could lean into that too. Maybe you could play around with the idea that he's some sort of military drone, Yeah, maybe something like this, sort of a big kind of engine on his back, giving him a bit of a weapon there, and maybe even kind of playing with that green eye, maybe making it look like some sort of night vision goggles, or it's kind of interesting sort of army kind of scope eye thing. It could be another interesting way of approaching the character. It could, again, it takes it out of the genre that I was kind of talking about before, but it might be a way that sort of spices it up for you to some degree. Certainly something you can play with. A couple other designs here that are non-Lego that I also think kind of relate to what you're talking about, and some of the things I was saying as well. The Iron Giant from the fantastic movie Iron Giant. He has a very similar color scheme to you. He has very similar eyes to your mock as well. And the Iron Giant in the movie is such a beautiful, innocent, like curious character that I think very much fits what I was seeing in your creation here. So maybe you can kind of convey elements of that character. If you haven't seen that movie, it's a good movie. Go watch it. You could even sort of spice up the torso in a very similar manner to how the torso design on this looks, kind of giving it that interesting kind of barrel in the middle there, the sort of darker barrel that he's got, the kind of rimmed look to it there. You could maybe remove the Hero Factory torso element and put something like that in place. So going a little bit more custom, trying some new techniques, approaching it in a new way. That could be something. He also has very similar limbs to the creation you've made so far. Yours has sort of more thin, longer limbs, which he does as well. So maybe you could approach it a little bit like this, you know, doing very bare, skinny upper arms and upper legs, and then kind of bulking out the lower legs a little bit as well. That could be another way you could approach it to change things up and make it more interesting. Again, might be a little bit of a departure from this cool jet robot look and leaning more into what I was saying before, but it just depends on the aesthetic or the type of character you want to create. Of course, that all comes down to you, you know. Just because I suggested stuff before doesn't mean you have to go with that. You know, you can go with whatever you choose. Don't let me, sway your thinking too much here, but hopefully some of the stuff I'm providing does spark something in you. Final idea, which is a bit of a departure as well. I saw this and I thought, you know, the character design you've made before, it could also be that maybe they're floating, you know? It could be that he suspends himself through flying or like magnets or something, and these legs and kind of act as like kind of booster jets themselves. And, you know, you build a little stand for him so he kind of supports his own weight and is kind of flying. You could do something very similar to this robotic image I found here. Maybe adding in some sort of, translucent color that kind of holds him up, or that sort of is this kind of tying energy that sort of holds together his limbs or his head or something like that. And really playing with a more sort of dynamic look to this character, giving him a really interesting leg design like this, and playing around with the trans colors. Because like I said, there's the trans green in this character. You could find more ways of adding even more trans green onto the character, and having that being some sort of binding force that holds together parts of it. Could be something you could approach with this work in progress here, or don't. It's up to you, of course. But I just wanted to throw some of my 2 cents, give you multiple different ways that you could approach this, and hey, hopefully 1 or 2 of those has helped. But yeah, really, man, I think this is awesome. I think you've done a good job so far. I know you said you think it's boring, but I think it's pretty cool. Let's move on to the next one now. This one is by Ivan, or Ivan is Ivan, and it is called Female Nerox. So this, he says in his email, was made for Megaladan's Rule 63 contest. Basically, the idea of Rule 63 is for every fictional character, there exists a gender-swapped counterpart to that character. And so that's essentially what the contest is building a character of some kind as a male if they're a female, or a female if they're a male. And so Neox, I believe, is Ivan's self-mock, and I'd love to get you some updated pictures of it, but unfortunately Mock Pages is down at the time of this recording, so I just had to Google the mock, and this was one of the images that popped up, and I believe that I have featured one of the iterations of this character on a previous version of the Bionicle Inspiration series, so to my knowledge, this is Ivan's self-mock that he is revamping as a female for the contest here. So obviously there's still a fair bit more you have to do on this mock here, but there's certain things that you're doing so far that I think is fantastic. So, for example, you're using some of this Knight's Kingdom armor here, and you're kind of really expanding out the hips on this female mock here. And you take a look at kind of the differences between the male and female body, and of course, male and females have various different shapes and sizes. That's just the way the human body works. So, you know, there's no one way to design a male or female character in terms of body shape, but naturally a female's body shape is more hourglass shaped, whereas the masculine body is a little bit more sort of stockier and broad. So using the Knight's Kingdom armor the way you have, to some degree, you're creating that hourglass shape and having larger hips, which is working in your favor, I think, on this mock so far. It might be worth dropping those down slightly, maybe, just having them a little bit more in line with the lower legs there. I think that could possibly work. But so far, I think it's looking pretty good. I reckon as well, you could probably just go with using the exact same mask that you've used before to some degree. I think that would work perfectly well. No reason you have to change that up there. But yeah, I think it's looking good so far. And let me show you a couple other mocks that I think could be of benefit to take a little bit of inspiration from. This is a mock by Lyra Layra Lura Ray Molly Ray, and it is called Makui, which I'm sure I'm pronouncing wrong, but I'm sure you'll forgive me, Molly. So what I love about this is has a similar color scheme to yours in terms of it's playing with blue. Of course, there's spring green and black thrown in there as well, but specifically the fact that it is using one of the canister lid pieces to form a dress. It could be an interesting way that you could approach this, you know? And also I like how Molly is playing with the color blocking on this character here so that it does look like they have boots and gloves on, specifically with the black elements, and then it sort of appears that the spring green is more sort of the flesh color to some degree. So you could do something quite similar with that even, really focusing in on your color blocking there, and having some similar elements. And of course, you know, the fact that this mock is dark blue and spring green, you don't have to use spring green, of course, but you know that that element does exist in dark blue, so you could very easily use it yourself. Now, maybe you don't have any canister pieces in dark blue. Maybe you were like me and you threw away some of your canisters, unfortunately, so you can't quite play with those pieces. But, you know, there's all sorts of different dishes or other sort of domed Lego elements, and, you know, whether or not they come in dark blue is, you know, debatable, but maybe you want to slightly change up the color scheme for this mock. So definitely play around with something like that. See what you can do, and experiment with pieces, or possibly even don't use dome-shaped pieces and build a more sort of custom design that uses a bunch of different pieces, but you kind of play with clips or angles and things, and so you can kind of create your own sort of dome-shaped dress of some kind. Or maybe you can even play with cloth elements to build a dress. That's another option. But of course, just because they're a female mock doesn't mean they need to be, you know, having a dress. You could, of course, continue with the approach that you've had, but I just thought it was very fitting that this mock has a very similar color scheme to yours, and so maybe there's certain things you could take from this and implement into the character design. But speaking of implementing things and putting it into the character design, I wanted to draw your attention to a really, really cool Technic set that came out a little bit ago, and it is 8012 Super Battle Droid. So this is a brilliant set. Lots of fantastic pieces in it. There's that beautiful metallic blue color in this that is pretty much unique to this set to some degree. But because you were specifically using those Knight's Kingdom armor pieces, and again, they're a bit of an obscure color as well, but they look very similar to that metallic blue that exists on this set here. So I don't know if you're in possession of this set, or, you know, maybe you're itching to do a Bricklink order, or go online and buy a set here, or maybe it's your birthday coming up and you're like, I'm gonna treat myself, I'm gonna buy a Technic set for myself to play with some pieces. This is a great set. I remember buying mine for like $40 on Bricklink once. I hope they're the same price. You know what? Let's check now. Let's go on Uncle Bricklink and let's ask them how much the Super Battle Droid set is on Bricklink. Let's type it into the magic computer machine now. Super Battle Droid Technic, Bricklink. Let's see what comes up, and I'll let you know exactly how much it is. Hopefully it hasn't increased in price. What are we going to? We're going to bet? We're going to place a bet here. We're going to say that it's above $40 now or under $40 now. Hopefully. Okay, well, checking Bricklink, it's about $50 now. So maybe that's just a little bit of inflation. I think I bought mine like 6 or 7 years ago at this point. So maybe that's just a bit of inflation as the price has gone up in that regard, but about $50. That's Australian dollars, mind you. So that's about, according to another Google search, that's about $28, $30 in US currency. So if you're not buying with your dollary dues, it's not too expensive there. It's pretty good. I mean, 50 Australian dollars, 30 American dollars, they're the same thing. But it's decently cheap for a really good set that has pieces in colors that you're already using. So it might be worthwhile to kind of play around with some of those pieces. It might be something to look into, of course. Now, I know you're building this for the contest, so hopefully you have enough time to order that, and it'll meet with the deadline and everything. But hey, maybe maybe the deadline's already over and you didn't quite finish it in time, but you're like, no, I'm still going to play with this idea. Why not? Might be something to think about at least. Regardless, though, given the nature of this contest as well, it'll also be interesting to think about very specific aspects that the male counterparts of this mock has that you can implement into the female mock. You know, do you want to give them a different weapon to the male counterpart, or do you want to take aspects that the male version has and find ways of just sort of subtly changing it, or maybe even keeping it the same? That just is something to think about. You know, to some degree, you could, you know, there's the other kind of concept of, you know, having a counterpart mock where it's like, here's the you know, the alternate universe version that is a different color scheme, and he's got wings this time and stuff. You know, maybe you could do some interesting stuff like that. Like you could really take this in a very different direction to how it originally is. So don't be afraid to kind of think out. You have a lot of creative license with, so don't be afraid to play around in certain extremes here, that's for sure. So hopefully that's helped you there, Ivan. If not, I say this every episode, be sure to reach out to me in other ways. Hopefully I can help you even further. If you want more sort of specific targeted advice, I'm happy to provide that for you. Alrighty, last work in progress mock today, and this is a really cool one. This is by Wotty, and this is a really awesome Bionicle transformer. So in the email he was saying, actually I'll just read everything he said. He said, "Here's a work in progress of a kind of cement mixer transformer named Overload. A character that's supposed to be kind of beefy and have thick armor of sorts, having twin-bladed shields on each arm, charging into battle like a juggernaut. I did the best with what I had, without using any system pieces, only using Technic or Bionicle / CCBS parts." That's really cool, man. That's awesome. I love the idea. Always love a good Transformer. Transformers was one of the other toys that I loved as I grew up, and still love to this day. Transformers are great. And always a really fun, unique challenge to build a Transformer with Lego pieces. It's not an easy task, and I think you've done a phenomenal job. I mean, you know, here it is in robot mode, and then here it is in vehicle mode. It's pretty great, you know. I love how you've used those larger shield pieces as the kind of barrel on the cement mixer there. I think that works well, and I love too how that then kind of splits apart and becomes these two extra shield-bladed weapons, like you were saying. Honestly, I look at this and I'm like, this looks like a finished mock, man. I think it's pretty good. You didn't necessarily specifically say anything that you wanted to work on with this, so I'll just throw a few suggestions out there for you, and maybe that can help you expand this even further. But honestly, man, I think it's pretty good. I think it's pretty much done, you know? So let's go to the first non-Lego example here, and this is Mixmaster, one of the Constructicons from the first generation of Transformers. And of course, you know, he's one of the Combinicons that forms together to make Devastator, which is awesome. So I'm gonna just throw that out there as a sick idea. Why not make a whole bunch of other transforming characters that can form together to make Devastator? Because that's really cool. It could be an interesting project for you. I respect that would be a very difficult project to some degree, but if you're up to the challenge, why not? But regardless, let's go back to Mixmaster here. So, of course, he is a cement mixer character, and certainly something I wanted to like, I love what you've done, how the barrel sort of splits apart and becomes a weapon. I think that's genius and really cool. But let's pay attention to a few other character designs for the toy and see how they played with the barrel. So specifically on certain iterations, the barrel is sort of a thing that kind of rests on the back. So if you were to redesign this, that could be another option, but to some degree I think that's boring. I think what you've got is way cooler. Or it kind of rests a little bit higher up, and maybe, you know, if it rests a little higher up like this this grey model here, it could be some sort of cool, like, scuba diving tank or something, you know, or some sort of just backpack of some kind. It's an interesting concept for sure, and can kind of, you know, double to some degree as just a different part of the aesthetic. You know, like I said, like a scuba diver thing, or some sort of transportation system, or something that, you know, he stores things inside it, or something like that. There's lots you could play around with there. So there's one option if you're kind of wanting to further expand it. Oh, well, and another thing, of course, all of these Constructicons here are awesome with their color scheme. Lime and purple. It's really in your face. It's really, really pops. And at the moment, your mock is more just sort of silver and black. And there's nothing wrong with that, of course. But maybe you want to spice it up. Maybe you want to throw in a few unique colors into the mix there. Ha! Into the mix. I didn't even mean that. And just see what that does. You know, always fun to play around with colors. So that could be something you play around with for sure. And we'll move on to this other mock here. And this is by Ralph Savelsberg. It's called Bumblebee. Now, I wish this transformed, but it's just a Volkswagen Beetle, and it's really well made. And I lied to you, it does transform. The reason I said that was because when I first saw this, I was like, oh, cool, this guy built a Volkswagen. Awesome, they made a Beetle, great, cool. And then I just scrolled to the next picture and I was like, oh, wow, it transforms. Oh, I didn't even see that. And honestly, my favorite type of Transformers, whether they're Lego or just an actual Transformer toy, are the ones that when it's in vehicle mode, you can't even tell that it's a Transformer. And I look at this mock here and I'm like, yeah, that's just a really well-built Beetle. There's nothing, why would it transform, you know? Sometimes you can kind of see the seams or the areas where it might transform, or it's a little gappy in areas, but not this man. You know, and then it transforms and you're like, wow, that's even also a really cool robot mode too. Like when you're able to get the vehicle mode and the robot mode to both look just exceptional, that's always cool. And I think to some degree you've kind of done that, but you know, maybe that can be areas that you can finesse a little bit more. Can you make the vehicle mode look even more like a very stereotypical cement mixer? I know you were saying in your description there in the email that you were kind of priding yourself on the fact you hadn't used any system, but maybe it's even worth playing with a bit of system there, really kind of building a very sort of brick-built looking cement mixer truck so that it really looks like a cement mixer truck in there. I kind of like what you've got so far. It kind of looks a little bit like a sort of Cybertronian cement mixer of some kind, which of course, you know, certain versions of Bionicle characters have that aesthetic in their vehicle modes, and I think that's actually pretty cool. And again, like I said, I think you've almost completed this mock, but I wanted to make sure to throw around a few more ideas to kind of help you out here for sure. So that could be something you play around with, you know, really finding new and unique ways that you can make this look even more exactly like a cement mixer so that you can sit it on your shelf and someone wouldn't even know it transforms, you know? I think that's at least something to think about and play around with. So yeah, really, really cool work, dude. I love what you've done so far. Certainly one of my favorite things is how certain elements of this kind of form little rims around the tires there. So it's kind of like a mud guard or something. That's just a really nice design in the vehicle mode. And then when it transforms, it certainly forms other elements of the design and really helps you out there. So it's cool that it's multi-purpose in that manner. Awesome stuff. So yeah, that has been a whole bunch of whips, and by a whole bunch I mean 3, which isn't really a whole bunch, but hopefully you enjoyed taking a look at some work in progress mocks and seeing different ways that I've suggested to help advance them into finalized mocks. And hey, if you've got a work in progress mock at home, hopefully some of the things I've said have helped you advance your own work in progress characters and mocks and creations. Or maybe, you know, I threw up a picture or something, you went, ooh, that's a cool idea. That sparked something in me and I'm going to make that mock. Hopefully that's the case. And like I said as well earlier on, if one of your whips was featured in this episode and you want a little bit more advice, don't be afraid to reach out to me on any of my social media and just shoot me a message. I'm happy to provide any more if you so please. So all my social media is in the links in the description below. Additionally, the submission email for the show is in the description, but it's also on your screen right now. Send me pictures, any information you want to put in the email, send it to that email there, and then I'll put it on the WIP Workshop in time. Actually, I have a fair few WIP submissions now, so I will slowly work through every single one of those. But don't be afraid to submit your work in progresses. I will, like I said, I'll feature it on the show in time. Additionally, there'll be links to the mocks you saw in today's episodes where they are applicable. Not everyone has social media on the WIP Workshop because then, you know, either they're just not on social media or these mocks aren't actually posted yet. But some of the examples and stuff, I certainly have links for those, so be sure to check that out as well. Anyway, that's it for today's WIP Workshop episode. Hope you very much enjoyed, and I'll see you in the next episode. See you guys. Happy building. Bye for now.